Live?
It says, there we go. We're now live. Okay, friends, I believe we're now live. You guys already missed it because Adrienne and I have just been joking for like a good 5 minutes.
Talking to ourselves.
Thinking that this live stream had started, doing the classic millennial pause and just not believing technology. I think this is why we do it.
Because we had to live through this trauma.
Exactly.
These Gen Zs don't understand what it's like.
You guys don't understand the Facebook live streaming days when you're like, is it live?
Is it live? Am I live?
Are we live? Are we going to talk
like
about
3,
this?
2, 1, and then you're not live. Yeah.
And then you have to like do the face, but you can't do the face too long. So then you have to say, we're just waiting for people to show up. And
this is like the origin of the millennial pause. So
guys, there's a reason for it. We don't just do it because we're noobs at technology. Like we walk so that you can run.
That's right.
Amazing. Well, I finally think that we're live here on the Facebook page. We're bringing live streaming back over here on the Ad Strategist. So for anyone who's wondering why we've been going live, obviously that's why. But today I'm joined by the lovely Adrienne Dorison. I feel like I already introduced her.
You did, but it was just to me. It's a practice round.
It was just to Adrienne. But basically, I was just saying that Adrienne is one of my most logical, systems-minded, just intelligent, strategic friends. I love the way her brain works, and I absolutely relish any time that we get to talk about business together. More importantly, she's a great role model in terms of having 2 beautiful daughters and have actually taken time away from the business to go and spend that brand new newborn time with them while her business still continued to grow without her. And so, as I've been alluding to some of the behind the scenes of where the heck did Bond go for the last few years after that big bro marketing article came out in late 2018, early 2019, and why I almost dissolved my business, but didn't because we're here today. And so I figured nobody would be better to come on and chat about it than Adrienne, who was behind the scenes of that whole experience and has some insight into how to optimize and systemize a business and create something that's more efficient, that just takes what you're doing and amplifying it so that you can just build that business that you love. So welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you, because you may not have seen Bond in a while, but I've seen her the whole time. So she's been here.
I've been here. And I think that's a great thing to point out is I may have publicly been gone during that time period, but it doesn't mean that I wasn't still in this industry behind the scenes, working on my craft, doing other things. So I think that's a great lesson to start with. Like businesses pivot and models pivot as we go. I do have a quick question for you out of the gate, actually, just after welcoming you here. I know that there's a lot of personal brands and or service providers who are still like that one woman, one man show that hang out here on my Facebook page. Mm-hmm. So could you speak to like the general broader terms of like what a lot of personal brands are doing that is keeping them stuck or preventing them from hitting those revenue goals that they're trying to go after from the like broadest terms?
Continuing to try to do everything themselves. I think that as I was a solopreneur when I first started, I was a personal brand. I was someone who had to just figure every piece of the business out. And so there comes with that, like this curse of knowledge of like, oh, you know how to do it. And so you just keep doing it, or you think that no one else can do it as well as you, when in actuality, there's a lot of things that as an entrepreneur, you just like figure out and you do it. But if we're really looking at it pretty closely, you're not the best person to do a lot of those things. And it could actually free you up to do what you do best, which would in turn grow the big business more quickly and more joyfully. You know, a lot of times as we grow as solopreneurs, we end up reaching our capacity. We also end up doing a lot of things that at the beginning we're like so high on like the excitement of starting something new and the potentiality that comes with that we're like, whatever, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do anything to make this business work. And I've been there and I've done that. And I'm always willing to do whatever it takes to make it work. But at some point you start to realize, like, I hate a lot of the things that I'm doing, like, and I'm maybe not even that good at them. And that's really slowing you down, but also maybe stealing a lot of your joy. And I think that then we start to think, oh, I just need to like do something else, or I need to like throw this whole thing in the garbage because I hate this. Right.
I always joke that
Do you understand?
Yes. I joke that one of my books is going to be called Blowing Up Bridges.
Yeah.
Like one day we'll just talk about all the pivots and the blowing up bridges that happen along the way. It almost sounds like what I find as an entrepreneur, you get that excited, like learning phase of something, and then you become this like jack of all trades in business because you had to at that first level, right? Like when you were first starting out, you were the person writing the emails, sending the emails, like figuring out the affiliate stuff, setting up your learning portals, like doing the online coaching, figuring out your scheduling system, like that all was you, right? And that is an enjoyable time because you feel like you're making an impact and solving puzzles, and like you get that epiphany of, oh yes,
it's like a lot of endorphins, right? When you figure it out and when you're like, yeah, it's all me, I got this. Like,
yes, it wasn't until you explained it to me in terms of the dichotomy of freedom versus control that I was like, and listen, it has been since what, 2019 we started working together, and I still have a struggle with the freedom versus control, because it's like I am now aware that I really like the control, and it's like, but is that giving me the outcome that I want? So could you share a little bit about that analogy?
Yeah, I created this like spectrum idea just because after working with hundreds of clients that want to create a business that runs itself, right? Like that's what Clockwork's all about. They want to have a business where they can have more freedom. And it's like, okay, great. So then we start working together and I'm like, you say you want more freedom, but you're doing things that actually contradict that. So now I'm confused, right? And what probably started as a shower thought has turned into this freedom and control spectrum, right? And so on one end of the spectrum is freedom, and on the other end of the spectrum is control. And you can't, by the very nature of a spectrum, you cannot have both of these things at the same time, right? And so do you want more freedom or do you want more control, right? Do you want someone to come to you for every single decision? Do you want to be able to make every single decision? And at face value, a lot of people are like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to be involved. But then what is your reaction or your response when someone makes a decision that isn't the exact decision that you would have made? Like, what is your response? How do you feel? What is your next steps from there, right? Do you tell them, actually, I need you to do it this way, or actually, I want you to come to me next time, or I'm going to change that decision because I don't like it, right? Then really you're living on that side of wanting more control. Okay. Nothing wrong with that necessarily. I would say both extremes are not good, right? Like complete control, meaning we want to basically micromanage every single decision, which is going to create a lot of frustration for you and your team members. Like no one really wants to be micromanaged, as well as you're creating a lot of bottlenecks in terms of the growth of the company and the individuals. Complete freedom would mean like abdication, right? Like now you're gone off on an island and they have no idea what they're supposed to be doing, or like have no direction or no leadership. And that's not necessarily where we want to go either. So we want to kind of identify like where you are now and then start to create safe ways to get where you ideally want to be. You know, like you can't just go from needing complete control to having complete freedom, because that's not going to feel safe for your brain. From like a physiological, I know a lot of the stuff that I do is like systems and team, but it's like as leaders, there's a lot of like psychological stuff that happens,
emotional stuff that comes up in the process. Just like, oh, it's a personal development course. Like,
yes.
Leadership at its finest.
Yeah. So I think just recognizing where your natural tendencies live. And I would say for most entrepreneurs, we do want a lot of control, even though our goals for our life and for our business are to want a lot of freedom. And so it's like, how can we balance those and make them a reality? We can, it just takes time and systems and building the trust and all of that.
Yeah, totally. What was your observation of me coming into the Clockwork program back in 2019 on that spectrum? Like what did you just observe as me, the human, going through it?
Well, you want a lot of control, right?
Yes.
But you say you don't. Like
Correct.
you say you say you want more freedom, which I believe. I don't believe that that's a lot. I believe that you do want more freedom. I think that you didn't understand what that looked like in a tangible way, right? Like,
Totally.
because even from, you're not necessarily someone who's like, oh, I'm a control freak. Like, I don't think that you have that air about you. But I think recognizing what having the control actually meant has taken time to be like, oh, like that's what you mean by having control, right? Like not interfering with this person's work or not interfering with like their creative process, or maybe I want to have a part in that creative process. And so that is where I want more control. So how do I communicate that and still have them be autonomous? And I think we've had to like figure out what works for you and practice some restraint and practice building trust within team members.
Totally.
Not just trust with like what decisions they're going to make, but also like trust with their creative process and like how they're going to do something. It might not be the same way you're going to do something. And is that okay? And so it's been a process, but I think that's true for everyone that goes through the program, like full on. And you like committed, like when you were in, you were like, okay, I'm committed to this, like point out my blind spots, or that's, you know, for lack of better term, like point out the things that I'm not seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we're going into any type of coaching or getting consulting on the business and you're not open to being like, okay, you know, show me the things, what can I do over here to improve? Like, what is the point of it at the end of the day?
I think you were also like you are also an expert at what you do. And so it's very challenging to just do that like day one, because there's a lot of training that has to take place for you to feel safe giving up some of that control, which is totally normal. But you have like high level of expertise. And we also have to figure out what are the things that make the most sense to hand off first, so that you're feeling safe in and not like blow it, like not breaking the business right in the process of transferring things over, but also like, how do I get some of these things out of my head? And that's a really hard process, especially for experts in their trade, but it's possible. It just takes a lot of time.
Totally. And for somebody like me who gets really adrenalized by launches and has like moved at the pace of internet marketing for literally the last decade of her life, working with a team that came from outside of the industry, I then ended up spending a lot of time like in the knowledge transfer process, because I was trying to transfer the things that I really find the funnest and do best. And so when I reflect back on 2019, when I started to build out the team, I realized that the things that I decided to get off my plate were actually the things that brought me the most joy.
Yeah.
And therefore, I was resentful when they didn't grasp it at the same level so that we could run together. And I made that decision because I did want to hire a few different roles all at once, right? And they were full-time roles, they were salaried positions. Looking back, analyzing my books, I realized that I could have still led the strategy and the charge and likely worked with more like expert level contractors for like smaller snippets.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that at the time, right? Like I was like, whatever, we're growing in this way, we're going in this way. But for me, during the time, like from 2019 to I think it was 2021, when I was building on the back end, the strategy system, we were in full production mode for the course and running it as like a coaching and consulting program. All of my time was spent in that knowledge transfer, and I wasn't getting my needs met in terms of like being on the leading edge of updates within the industry, right? Like now that I've randomly decided to come and just F around and find out on the Facebook page this year with no pressure. We're live streaming again, for crying out loud. It's brought like a joy back to the process that at the beginning, I just wasn't listening to like my true intuition of the things that I did want control over and the things that would like ultimately give me freedom. And of course I had hired out the things that I wanted to control, which then slowed me down like crazy in the process.
Yeah, totally. I just learned this new like red light stoplight tool that we're gonna use internally, but also like
new tools.
Love new tools.
I love new tools.
That we're gonna share with our clients too, but I'll share here as well. And I don't know the original source because I heard it from a podcast and they didn't share the original source. So if I ever figure it out, I'll
come back.
Yeah. But it's a pretty simple concept. And I think it will be applicable to people who understand clockwork and understand like wanting to remove yourself from a lot of the decisions. So basically, as a leader or a team member, you use this stoplight tool, red, yellow, green, of what your involvement on a project, what you want your involvement on a project to be, right? So red light, meaning like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like you just own it completely. Like, I don't need to know about it. Like, just get to the outcome. You got this. Yellow light, like maybe please update me on like progress or like what's happening, but I don't need to be involved in all the nitty gritty decisions. Green light, like this is something I really love, or I like really want to be involved in a lot of these decisions. And so like, please green light me, like don't let anything kind of move forward without me. And an example of this is like, we just redid our website. And normally like I would be maybe a yellow on this, but we've just had a couple years where we had to redo our website multiple times, like spend a lot of money, spend a lot of, heartache trying to get it right. And so for this one, like I was a green light. I was like, normally like, this is not something that like my marketing director could handle all of this. And I fully trust her to do that. But like, I wanted to be involved, and so I was like, I'm a green light on this project, right? Like I want to be involved in the decisions. I want to be involved in everything that's kind of happening with this project. And so that is like a nice, like communication tool you can use with your team, with your, internal team, as well as if you have clients, you might internally be able to communicate like, okay, like with these clients, I'm a green, with these, I'm a yellow, with these, I'm a red, etc. But I like having tools that allow us to communicate in the same language, right? So for having that for everyone to understand, then you don't need someone to like constantly interrupt you for things that you're like, why are they asking me this? Like, why are they involving me in this? Like, I don't want to be involved. And so just having like I'm a red light on this, like no need. We're also doing this like with our team, sometimes we have all team meetings and certain team members maybe want to share updates or share something that they're working on in their area, but we have other team members that may not like have the mental capacity to like do a brainstorm on someone else's area right now. And so they now have like permission to just be like, hey, I'm a red light on this project. So like, I'm going to hop off the call, like, because they need to like focus on what they're doing. They maybe don't even have the brain capacity to like bring new ideas to the table for this. And, we don't want other people to be offended. And so like having that same, like, I find that like having communication tools like that, having common language can help with like, oh my God, they left, they must hate me. And it's like, no, like, I'm just a red light on this, you know?
Totally. And it helps the business because especially if you're paying either hourly or like a salaried employee, and
like not everyone needs to be there.
Yeah. They don't need to be on all the calls knowing all the things unless that's their domain, unless they want to be kept up to date on it.
And so for you could have even like used it as like, okay, for these creative projects, like I'm a green light, like I really need to like know what's going on. But like on these, like I'm a yellow or like I'm a red, like don't even ask, you know?
Totally. Oh, so many like juicy nuggets and
nuggets,
so many like lessons learned. I'm finding now as I move into like my real estate journey and like I'm more building assets with the cash flow that has come as a result of being in the internet marketing world. it's so much easier to let go of control because I know that I'm working with experts. I know that I'm working with the people who have done this over and over, right?
Yeah. And like it's interesting because your tendency in that space is not to be like, I need to become a general contractor and learn all these things. But for some reason in the internet marketing space, we think that.
Don't get me wrong. Like, let me just,
like, let me know enough to
let me just show you some architectural drawings that I've put together. Like, you got to do that stuff. Like, you got to learn it. But I get to be in that, like, that learning zone again, which I realize is something that just gives me joy and is the reason why I'm an entrepreneur. And like, it's the learning that actually makes me feel like I have more freedom. And when I realized that,
you felt trapped when you couldn't.
I felt trapped because I was like, for 2 years at that point, it was actually like, I'd been running the program for 5 years as like a coaching program. And I have been talking about the same stuff for the last 5 years. And don't get me wrong, it's amazing. Still to this day, I'm so damn proud of this program. Yeah. Adrienne knows how long I spent focusing on, in the clockwork term, this delivery bottleneck to bring the course up to speed. But for me as a human, as the CEO, as the owner of the business, like, I wasn't getting my needs met around that. And then therefore I was like, wah, wah. And so, like, do you have any thoughts on, because I know in the online business owner space, there's a lot of talk about like multi-passionate entrepreneurs and just people who do pivot a lot and go from thing to thing. Do you have any just insight or perspectives that you'd want to share around observing that and kind of where people can find that like happy medium or just happiness in general in what they're doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought about like the multi-passionate because I feel like I don't want to offend anyone who feels like a multi-passionate, but
just pretend you're talking to me. I'll identify that way. Right now, you say what you want to me.
Okay.
Anybody else take this on. This is just Amanda Bond.
It reeks of like self-sabotage to me. Like, okay, you get it just to where we're about to like be very successful and hit some goals. And now conveniently, I'm interested in doing something else.
I feel personally attacked in the best way possible.
When in actuality, like, okay, let's take this thing that you've brought to a point that is very successful. Let's clockwork it. Let's get you out of the things that are not bringing you joy anymore. Let's put team in place. Let's put systems in place so that those things can continue to run and provide you with revenue, but also provide your clients with the end impact that you spent a long time and it is actually very valuable to the marketplace. Like, let's put those structures in place so that you can create that freedom to go do whatever is next for you. You know, we see a lot of clients, and I think this is a very normal entrepreneurial, like if you're like a true entrepreneur, I think this is a very like natural tendency to like build something and then get an idea for something else. And it's like, well, we see a lot of clients who come into Clockwork and they're ready to just like throw the business away because they're like, I'm super excited about this thing, but now I'm resentful of this thing over here because it's not letting me go and do this thing. And so I'm just going to leave it and go start this other thing. And I'm like, give me 12 months and then you'll have an income that can then provide you the spaciousness you need to go and play with this thing. Otherwise, you'll end up resenting this other thing too at some point, right? Because either it's not financially providing for you yet, or now it's sucking you dry because you're completely bottlenecked and involved in all this stuff over here. Whereas if you can learn this skill set to clockwork the business, right? Like using that as a verb, like if you can clockwork this business to a point where you don't need to be involved in the things that you don't want to be involved with anymore, you can then apply that to the next thing you do and the next thing you do and the next thing you do. And then you're thinking through that lens of like, okay, I'm passionate about this right now, but like, what are the pieces of it that I don't even want anything to do with as I build it, you know, so that I'm not stuck in the middle of it and resenting it anymore. So like, I think it's totally fair to be multi-passionate. I think all of us can relate to having multiple interests. I also find that like a lot of the entrepreneurs that have been in it for a long time, like business owners that we meet that have been in it for a long time, are probably multi-passionate and just forgot who they are, like truly at the core. Like they just, because they had to be so laser focused on the business and they had to do everything, like the idea of taking a 4-week vacation is terrifying to them for a few reasons. One, because the business currently can't run for 4 weeks without them. Number two, they're like, what would I do for 4? Like, who am I without my
business?
business?
I had no idea what the heck I would do for 4 weeks.
Yeah, they're like, who
shut it
who
down.
am I? Like, what do I even like to do? Like, what are my hobbies now? My hobbies now are this business. Like every free moment is kind of spent doing this, or, you know, zoning out at night because I'm exhausted. And like, I have never found hobbies. They haven't like refound those hobbies until we start the clockwork process. And I'm like, all right, your homework is to go play pickleball or something, you know, like now that you have some free time, let's use it to enjoy your life. And so I think that, you know, people are multi-passionate and forget about that over the years because they've kind of been forced to not do those things, because it's like, you got to pay the bills, you got to feed the kids, and they're bottlenecked in the business right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at myself. So now getting back into real estate, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I used to be a franchisee for an exterior home painting company about, when would it have been? 2004, almost 20 years ago. Wait, 2004? Yeah, 2004.
That's 20 years. Oh my God.
That's almost 20 years ago. So I was a franchisee for an exterior home painting company. That was my like first parlay. What's the word? Parlay?
I think it's for
somebody in the comments.
Something. Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
We know what you mean.
Into entrepreneurship and running a business. And so I forgot how much, like, I really love the physicality of like working in the 3D versus like constantly always being on the computer. And so over the last like year and a half, as I went down this journey and this pathway and really started to build, you know, my real estate portfolio side of the equation, I'm just finding so much like daily joy. Like when I went to the job site just to check on it real quick yesterday, dropped off a check, and I was like, I love this. Like, look at the progress you guys made today. I'm like so hyped by it. But it's actually helped me because I did for some time shut down the program of strategy after like we had a version of it. We completely scrapped that version and I redid it from scratch. And then I realized the vision and the model that I had selected early on when coming into the clockwork process, after realizing like I was giving away all the stuff that lit me up, I realized that the way that I was even structuring and running the program wasn't advantageous for my own self and like my own enjoyment and discovery and like staying on top of trends and understanding all the nuances and things and sharing that with people. So I went through this process where we've restructured the program. There isn't a coaching element. There isn't a consulting element because I've spent 5 years of my life distilling it down to like this actionable DIY framework. Yeah. And even to the point where we don't even have a payment plan anymore, because I'm like, if there's a payment plan, that requires a process of follow up. If a payment defaults, like there's just more activities. And I'm like, I want to experience more freedom on that side of the business because I am putting more time and resources over into this new like hobby venture for me because I'm having so much fun with it. And it took me 5 years to get to that point to be like, hey, this thing that you built is good enough by its damn self.
Right? What I love about this discovery is that, which I think takes people a long time sometimes, and sometimes it just takes clients like being in our program and us just like continuing telling them like, you have permission to do whatever you want, right? Like it's your business, and like you're giving yourself permission to like, we don't have a consulting part of our program, we don't have this, like I'm not giving a payment plan, right? Like all of those are choices that you get to make, right? And a lot of times the questions that our clients ask us in the program, whether it's about how they structure their program or how a system is developed or how they hire someone or how they, give benefits to that team member. They're like, can I do that? And I'm like, you can do whatever you
want.
Like, what is hanging you up about that? Right. Like, let's talk about that, because truly you can do whatever you want. It's your business. So like, how do we want to make people feel? How do we need to structure the system to support that? Like, I can help you navigate that, right? Like, what do we need to have in place to allow that to happen? But a lot of it is like, oh, like I can do whatever I want, right? Like, I just need to figure out the systems and the pieces that need to plug in to allow that to actually happen. But yeah, I wish small business owners would know that more deeply, that like you get to choose, right? You don't have to do what everyone else is doing or what the corporate model has told us we should do,
I've traced back, where did certain ideas come from that I think I have to do in my business, and the lineage of it is hilarious. It's like, oh, that one influencer during that one launch,
they did that, or they said that
this for that person, or they said like, to be successful, you have to do that. So now I've internalized other people's beliefs along the way. And it took me a while to sit with it and be like, is this really mine? Right? Like I worked with Sean Twinge and Andre Chaperone. I was in a mastermind, like a writing mastermind with them this past year. And it took them literally sitting down and being like, Bond, is this true?
Yeah.
Like, do you need to do that? Or are you just making this up because someone sometime who had value or significance or importance in your life said that thing, you took that as law forever on? And I was like, oh my gosh. Yes, because this internet marketing world is a very small pond. And you think that, somebody might be watching and think like yourself or myself, like what we say is law. It's never law. It's just our own experience and like insight having gone through the process. But that doesn't mean that like your way can't be completely different at the end of the day.
Right. And it should, if your vision is different, if you have
Totally.
Totally.
I wrote a little note here to myself to say that like, when I first started this process, my business model, my vision, and my QBR I chose were not aligned, but I refused to see it at first. So one, I know you don't really love talking about the QBR, but can you give like a 1-sentence synopsis of what that concept is? And then I have a question that follows that.
Yes. So the QBR is called our queen bee role. And the idea is that in a beehive, there are many roles that the different bees do, but there is only one like most important role, and that activity is the laying of the eggs, right? And so the other bees will actually stop doing their other roles, whether that's like nursing the young or cleaning out the hive or going to collect pollen. Like they will stop doing all of those activities in order to make sure that the queen is able to continue laying eggs, like, because that is the most important thing to the survival of the colony as a whole. And so we took that concept and are basically saying your company also has a queen bee role. Your company also has something that is the most important activity that everything else is kind of dependent on, right? And so we help our clients figure out like, what is that most important activity? Sure, people might have other roles, there might be other things that we do, but if it really came down to it, like we can never stop doing this thing. And actually, if we stopped doing some other things, we might be able to elevate this thing more, which in turn would grow the company and create even more efficiency, which is what we're ultimately looking for, right? So we help our clients identify that queen bee role, because even if you've read the book, like a lot of times people think they know what it is and they come into our program and they're like, I know my QBR. And we're like, okay, sure. And then they go through the process and then they're like, yeah, I didn't know my QBR.
Yeah. Do you remember what mine is?
It's like like the actual content process.
Yeah. So it's producing automagic content. And like that was a clue for me that the production of the actual program of the strategy system was in my zone of genius. Like I have never been happier than when I was scripting. Like for everyone who has been in the program and doesn't know, that entire program was teleprompted and scripted out. When I tell people that, they're like, shut up. So thank you if that's been your
compliment. If I do a good
ever.
job, yeah.
Yeah, it's
you have a career in news anchor,
in broadcasting.
You want. Yeah,
perfect. I'm practicing on these live streams again. We're like, it's 2018. But like my entire writing process, production process, like that was always the thing that brought me most joy. And that was what I used to create strategy. But after the creation was done, I actually like fell into a slump where I was like, oh, I don't feel like I'm now in that process and doing that thing. And of course, then the momentum started to slow in the business because I wasn't producing automagic. It's a word. If you know me, I'll put an AD in the middle of any word to make it more ad.
And that's the thing about the QBR is like, it's an internal tool. So like you can make up a word as long as like your company understands what that means, right?
Totally.
And like how we do it, how we
defined
protect it.
Internally. Like there's a whole process around it. But my question for you is, what would you say to people like me who like knew, right? They had the intuition of what they wanted, but maybe were afraid to pivot towards it?
Interesting. I think why were you afraid of pivoting towards that?
I just thought it was almost like a different business model, because now as I start to like work with clients again in a different capacity, now that there's like this idea in the back of my head of, hey, what if you took that ad process that you codified over the last few years and started offering it again in agency model? Like my brain is like, oh my God, we're starting over at the beginning. I then panic. And then I get fearful, like to quote unquote pivot around it.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me.
You guys are getting also a therapy session apparently
on
this. This is why you got to bring the friends on.
My thought around this is two things. One, I always go back to the vision, right? Like, what do you, not just for the business, but for your life? Like, what do you really want? Because if you're scared of pivoting because of all the work that we've put into it, well, that doesn't really get you to your goals though. So what's the point, right? Yeah. It's like, and then I think the second part of it is the sunken cost fallacy, right? Like we are clearly hanging on to this thing that because we put so much work into it, that like, we have to keep going. We have to keep going. Like we've put so much work into it. It's like, but if what you really want is not going to be acquired by continuing to do this thing, then what is, again, like, what's the point, right? Like we really have to go back to like our vision, our goals, our desires for our life. I think that I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who are just like doing what they're doing and slogging through it because they think they have to, or because the cost of switching it is heavy, it's big, it's scary, right?
Totally.
But I think you can also do that carefully while because I'm also like very financially conservative in my coaching, in my advice, in my own practice. I do not want people to like just burn something to the ground and like, you know, start something. Like if you have something going well for you over here and we have a new direction that we need to pivot to, like, I want to make sure that that's going to work and that we are financially supported throughout that process. Because if you're already scared about doing it, you know, then also pulling the plug on our finances is a huge disaster. Like it's actually not going to be successful. And so I think just working intimately with so many people, like knowing that like none of this all matters if like you're not actually moving towards what you want for your life.
Yeah.
So, and at some point you'll burn it all to the ground anyways if you don't do it strategically. So we might as well do it strategically with a plan in place to support you and to support your livelihood and to continue to support your clients, and just recognize that like there's probably a little bit of this sunken cost fallacy at play that we can be like, okay, but is that worth continuing to pour into?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times when people are hiring, this comes up similar but different in that people are like, I'm afraid if I like train this person that they're going to like leave and go start their own thing. And my response is always, but what if you don't train them and then they stay? Right? Like,
yeah.
Like, okay, you're living in this fear now, and we're not doing the thing that's actually going to be most supportive to you and the business, which would be training this person, right? Like, because you're not training them out of fear. It's
Totally.
like, but what if they stay? Now you like, so it's like, it's same but different in terms of the bigger picture here about your whole business. It's like, okay, what if I just stay here? And it's like, okay, but what if if you're doing that thing that you hate doing for the rest of your life? Like, well, that's not any better. So we might as well move through some of the fear and make the pivot and do it cautiously, but with intention,
Yeah. I hope everyone can watching understands, like, for a highly emotional person like me, why Adrienne is just like such a rock in my life, such a good friend. And just like, you're so wise, and the way that you present just the perspective shifts that we need as business owners has truly been game changing. Like, I joke that like I live a clockwork way of life. It's my own interpretation of it, right? Like, it might not be the like rigid systems way that some people would interpret building out a business that runs itself, but like it has truly changed my perspective in so many ways, made me a better leader, like, in the process. And so the confidence that I've gained as an entrepreneur, as somebody that wakes up every day and decides to do this, because it's not always certain, right? Like, we're coming up with visions, and then we're like, we want that. We go after that. And I commend every single person watching who does that in their business every day. And one of the reasons that I'm having Adrienne on today is just to share more about her upcoming event next week. So if you've gotten any value out of this, I would love to invite you to this event. I will be hanging out and cheering everyone on in the comments. And so it's next Tuesday, March 28th. Remind us of the time, Adrienne.
I think it's from 10 a.m. Eastern to 3 p.m. Eastern, with like a couple breaks in there because we're going to be like doing some work. Like, it's a free event, but we've packed so much value into. We've never done something like this. So I'm super excited.
Guys, I have seen her paid events, and I know she's going to bring literally the same amount of value, if not more, to this one, because that's what you do when you're a badass entrepreneur like herself. Yes. So Don't Break Your Business is the name of the event, happening next Tuesday, March 28th. There is a link somewhere. We haven't live streamed in a while, so
it's somewhere.
It's not here. It's there somewhere there.
Somewhere around here, or ask in the comments and we'll give it to you.
In the comments. Let us know if you have any follow-up questions. We'll happily answer them in
Can I tell them a little bit about what we're going to do at the event?
Please, I would love to hear it.
So the Don't Break Your Business event is for those of you who are interested in growing, scaling your company. You have these big goals, but maybe we haven't thought through what those big goals might mean for the back end of the business. I find this to be true so often when we work with clients, especially those that they come in and they're under one of our umbrellas of what we would call like scaling too fast. And they're experiencing the breaking of the business, right? They went viral, or they had their product on Good Morning America, and
they wrote a bro marketing article.
They wrote a bro marketing article and it blew up, right? And now they're recognizing like all the areas of the business that are not able to be supported with the same level of excellence previous to, oh shoot, we just hit our goals and now we can't actually handle it, And so we're going to help you walk through. I'm going to show you how to do a process map. I'm going to show you how to process map your entire business and go through all of what we call the bottlenecks in your business and identify like where it might break if you actually hit your goals. One of my favorite quotes is by James Clear, and he says, "We do not rise to the level of our goals, but rather fall to the level of our systems." And so if you are someone who has big goals, like, great, but let's make sure we can actually handle those, because if you are any type of energy, spiritual, or just practical like me, and you're like, okay, energetically, I'm probably not going to be doing the things that I need to be doing to reach these goals, because I know deep down inside, I'm not actually prepared for that to happen. So we will walk through, show you exactly how to do that throughout the course of the day. You're going to process map your business. I'm going to live coach people on their process and identify like, where are the gaps? Where are the improvements that you need to make, so that you can either put those things in place now, or just have a very clear view of like, okay, if this, then that, right?
Yeah.
Like if this happens, this is what we do. And that is kind of what I want all people to be prepared with, is like, you don't have to hire that person now, but you should know when we hit this number, that's the time that we need to engage our hiring process, right?
Yeah.
So come join us. It's a free event. And I think it's going to be really fun, a full day of working on the behind the scenes to make sure you do not break your business, because I've seen too many people break in this process.
Well, I'll give you a testimonial to that. So even if you're not in the, like, I'm ready to double my business, scale, blow up. When I went through this process the very first time, we ended up process mapping my payment recovery process. And I ended up getting so many wins in terms of the way that we were bookkeeping. Even we shaved, I can't even remember, it was like 26 hours a year off of manual ways that we were bookkeeping, and at like $40 an hour. What's the math on that? I can't even. 800.
Don't ask me. I'm not the on.
Yeah, I can't do math unless if I'm live. If like 2 seconds after this goes off, I'll know the answer. And so we ended up saving like 26 hours there. And we also then looked at this, like through the lens of the same process, we were able to get our delinquent payment recovery rate. Like we had 14% delinquent payments. We got that down to 100% recovery rate. So 0% delinquent payments after going through this process. So not even growing the business, just going through this activity allowed us to keep more money in my pocket at the end of the day. So I could buy assets and invest in houses and do architectural drawings for fun now.
It's a super valuable tool. It's like one of my favorite tools that we teach that doesn't get as much highlight. So I'm excited to bring it to the event and show you all how to process map anything in order to find some gaps, create some improvements, whether that's saving money or growing or whatever it may be. But it's going to be super fun, and I hope to see everyone there. We've got hundreds of people coming. So it's going to be a blasty blast. It's going to be a blasty blast. I love your events. I love you. Thank you so much for coming on and just chatting with all this, and for the work that you put. I'm glad you're back on the Facebook Live, Thank you. Thank you. I figured we're bringing back, or we're not bringing back, we're supporting the millennial pauses. We're bringing back 2018 live streams. We're showing up and not giving an F. Any final words? That you said like that 2004 was like almost 20 years ago, because that's like my high school reunion. I guess I'm going to be going to a 20-year reunion. Accurate. That is an accurate statement. This is really scary. Girl, us millennials though, we're looking good for our ages, so I feel at least good about that. Any final words before we sign off today? Just thank you for having me, and I hope to see everyone at the Don't Break Your Business event. I think that you're gonna learn a ton. You're gonna meet a lot of cool people just connecting in the chat with other businesses, other entrepreneurs, and I hope that even just this conversation was valuable to you in some way, like thinking through some of the, little tools that I shared. I hope that you can find some more freedom and less control in your life and in your business. Even if it looked like my journey where, you weren't clear on the outcome, and you're still not clear on where you're trying to go, but at least you're showing up to the process. You're getting a little bit better every day. You are taking a look at what you are doing. You're questioning why. You're making it more efficient in the process to create the assets that can kind of fuel your life, meaning like they can create the revenue that you can go out there and, take the spaciousness to figure out what you want to do when you grow up. Because some days I'm not even sure I know the answer to that myself. So I think that's true for a lot of entrepreneurs. So it's so fun. Create so if I can do along the way by clockworking them. Exactly. Exactly. So thank you so much for your time today, my dear. Welcome. It has been an absolute pleasure.